Hi, this is Allison Sheridan, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. This week, we're going to take a second look at Affinity Photo from affinity.serif.com. This is an image editor that I told you about last year in 2 episodes of Screencasts Online. Episode 560 was where I taught you about the extensions to Apple Photos that gives you some of the capabilities of Affinity Photo within Apple Photos, but 565 was a deep dive into the real application of Affinity Photo. I'm revisiting it today because they've released version 1.5, which adds huge capability. I'd like to emphasize that they did not charge any extra money for this release. Affinity Photo retails for $50, and as of the time of this recording, it's on sale for $40. There is no monthly fee with Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo 1.5 includes a new extension that will allow you to open images from within Apple Photo right into Affinity Photo. This is really cool because you can do your edits in Affinity Photo, then save and close, and your image is back in Apple Photos where you want to manage it. The new version also includes the ability to edit 360 or sometimes called spherical images in their native form. You can record macros to automate what you're already doing in Affinity Photo. This sounds really hard and complicated, but it's actually really easy and intuitive, and I'll show you how it works. You can do batch processing. Maybe you just want to resize a set of images. That's really easy with batch processing in Affinity Photo 1.5. Or you can be a little more advanced and apply your macros to that set of images. Batch processing is also really easy and intuitive. We're going to get into something a little bit trickier called focus merge. This is a technique that allows you to take several photos of the same very small object with a very shallow depth of field and merge those images together so that the entire object is in focus. HDR and Tone Mapping is now built into Affinity Photo. I'm going to save most of the advanced topics for last, and I'll give a detailed explanation of HDR and Tone Mapping when we get to that topic. Finally, Affinity Photo is now available also on Windows. It is a concurrent and feature parity release because it actually is the same code base.